ready? Okay, just check. Yeah, it's 10:30. And they're on a strict schedule here because they're recording all this stuff. Okay, so welcome out. I'm Larry Correia, and I am you guys know who I am, right? No. Who are you? I don't know how much time, because how much time do you want to waste on intros? All right, I'm a guy who writes books. I've sold a couple copies. Okay, here we go. So, I'm best. Oh, there we go. Wow. All right. Okay. So I'm best known as an action writer, and so I get asked to do panels on action a lot. I'm assuming everybody here is an author, so we're going to get down straight nuts and bolts. Also, I do a podcast, a writing podcast called Writer Dojo. It's me and Steve Diamond, and we actually did a 3-episode thing on writing action. And so I'm going to go through just some tips and tricks, nuts and bolts, straight up writing action scenes, business stuff, and then I'm going to try to get as many of you guys' questions as I can in the limited amount of time we've got. Okay, so first off, writing action, guys, is I want you to set aside, if you've got like your thing like in your head where action is separate from the rest of the book, get rid of that. So right now, a lot of people tend to think, okay, so I've got plot scenes, I got character scenes, now I've got an action scene. And we really fall into this, especially if you watch a lot of movies, and you'll have your big set piece action bits of the movie as a kind of separate scene than the rest of the thing. I don't want you to think of it like that. I want you to think of action as a thing that's it's inherent in the story you're telling. And while you're having action scenes, you are also doing other stuff like character development, plot reveals, that kind of thing. So don't think of them as two separate things. Think of your action scenes as a time to develop character. Think of your action scenes as a time to reveal that other stuff. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay, so we're all on the same page. Now, all right. First off, when you're writing action, avoid what's called the checklist. All right, the dreaded checklisting. And what I mean by checklisting, if you are writing a first person, that door is hitting my tinnitus. How about you guys? One reason I write good action scenes is I haven't done that, but because of that, I got terrible tinnitus from my youth. Okay, so checklisting. When you're writing a first-person point of view thing, you look at the page and you look at your monitor and you see I, like a river of eyes going down the page. Or if you're doing third person and it's he, you're doing checklisting. So what I mean by that is, like, if I'm writing a fight scene and a bunch of actions are happening and I'm first person and I say, I did this, I did that, he did this, I did this, I did that, he did this. That reads like crap, right? And what happens? The reader starts to skim. They become subconscious, and they look at that river of eyes, and they start to skim. You don't need to put every single part of the action scene in. You just need enough that they're not bored or confused, okay? So don't put too much, they get bored and start to skim. Don't put so much that they get, or so little they get confused. So one time I was writing a novel with a guy named Correia. It was called Dead Sins. It was that series of thriller. And we had a bit where this guy's escaping from prison, right? And the protagonist character has gotten one of those clubs. Okay. You know the side handle batons, right? Here are 24 batons. Okay. So Mike was writing this sequence, and he picks up this baton, and he's like, talking about how he starts beating this guy up with the baton, but he had to describe, his character's left-handed, so he had it in his left hand, and they had the baton out like a short end, and he had the long end down his forearm, and he poked it with it, and then he flipped around. So Mike wrote this entire paragraph of how he hit this dude with the baton, right? You know what we changed that to in the final edit? I hit the guy with the baton. Okay, because the danger here, guys, you guys might, okay, so camera people, is it okay if I walk in front of the table?
Yes.
Okay, cool. I like this more. This is more organic. Okay, cool. So think about it this way. When you're writing these sequences, you want it to be like close and personal and visceral and not detached. The danger you get into when you checklist and you put too much information is it gets really slow. Because think about it, if you describe every single thing that happens in an action sequence, all of a sudden, the fastest paced part of your book is now 13 pages long. Okay? I mean, how long is the knife fight in Dune? 36 pages? I don't know, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. Let's see. Okay. You don't need to, unless you're trying to do that specific type of story, like Louis LaMoore used to have short stories where it'd be 10,000 word story about one round of the boxing match. Okay? And you pull that off. Also, we're not writing back in the 50s, okay? It's time to change. So, yeah, keep that in mind. So that's one of the things too. Now, the other thing you guys need to think about is when you write your action scenes, point of view protagonist character and what their knowledge base is. This is really important, and you can see when people screw it up. There's a thing I refer to as Buffy the Vampire Slayer syndrome. Okay, you guys all watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer? When you take a bunch of high school kids that don't really have any experience with combat, they find out vampires are real, and 10 minutes later they're kung fu experts. Okay. We can get rid of, you can get away with that on television because there's a cool visual, but we don't have that advantage, guys, right? We're writing, so it's all in their head. We're creating the visual. So you got to write your action sequences appropriate to what the point of view character knows and what they're capable of. Make sense? So if I'm writing, even read Heart Magic, okay, so I got a couple. It's pretty good. For those of you who haven't read, it's really good. Check it out. You're all a bunch of writers. You're going to get shielded to a lot this week. So I got two main point of view characters in this series, right? The one main point of view character is a World War I veteran, hard-boiled detective, super tough guy, and his superpower is manipulating gravity, and so he's very much a solid, steady kind of dude. So when I write an action scene from his perspective, it's all filtered through his point of view. He's chill. He's seen this before. He's risked his life before. He's been hurt before. He doesn't really get surprised. He doesn't get too particularly emotional. He just deals with the problem. The second character, point of view character, is a teenage girl who's new to this kind of thing, never seen violence before, and she's kind of ADHD. The whole ferret on pixie sticks trope. Okay, that's her. So her fight scenes are chaos, and she doesn't know what she's doing. And it's a lot of fear, and a lot of confusion, and a lot of run-on sentences, and a lot of, oh my gosh, I don't know what happened. Whereas the other dude was just systematic and methodical. Okay, so if you guys are writing like a guy who's like, say a master MMA fighter, right? Chuck Liddell or somebody, that if you're writing him wrestling some dude, and he's beating the crap out of him, he's like, yeah, I can beat this guy, this is pretty good. What did I have for lunch? Lost a lot of blood. Ah, cool. All right, so it's all perspective. It's somebody who's never done that. Totally different perspective. If you're writing a point of view character who's never been punched in the face before, when they get punched in the face, totally different. Okay? Now, on that note, I recommend all of you go get punched in the face. No, for real, okay, like, for real, I'm dead serious on this. For liability purposes. Now, what I mean by this is, go and get some experience. If you are writing sword fighting kind of stuff, go learn about sword fighting. If you are writing guns, go learn about guns. If you are writing whatever, learn what you can. Now, obviously, you can't go sword fight a dragon, okay, for the most part. I mean, maybe you're hopped up on shrooms, but go learn what you can, because the more you guys actually learn, the more you actually do, the more you actually practice this stuff, the more visceral it becomes, the better and more realistic it becomes as you write it. Like, I'm a gun guy. That's my background. Before I was a writer, I was a firearms instructor for a lot of years. And I was a competition shooter, and I did all this stuff. That's why I'm a gun guy. So I write stuff that gun guy audiences really like, because I'm not faking it, I know that stuff. If you are writing gun stuff, you need to do enough research to make sure you write that convincingly and you don't, like, throw those people off. The only people that are worse, like, readers than gun people are horse people. Okay. Screw up horse stuff. Yeah, they'll screw things in forever. Okay, horse people get very upset. They're not motorcycles that eat grass. Okay. So go do some research. If you are doing a character who is a mixed martial artist, go take some class. If your character is a jiu-jitsu guy, go take some Brazilian jiu-jitsu classes. Get punched in the face. Learn what that's like. Learn about the effects of adrenaline, because this is all stuff you can put in your actions. Now, you can look this up on the internet, and it'll tell you like basically the medical description, but then the experience gets a little bit different and a little more visceral, and you can write that there. But there are things of adrenal response, or stuff like you will lose hearing. It's actually what's called auditory exclusion, so there will be noises that your brain just won't record. You will experience tunnel vision. Your vision will tend to tunnel in on the threat. That's why, like, when people get in a gunfight, they tend to look really hard at the gun and forget everything else. That's that effect. You will turn dry mouth. Because honestly, if you've ever been punched in the face, there's a difference between getting punched in the face by a sucker punch versus getting hit in a fight that you already know you're in. Because what happens as part of the adrenal response is you actually get dry mouth, and when you get punched in the face by surprise, tears squirt out your eyes. Whether you want to or not, no matter how tough you are, you all of a sudden get sucker punched in the nose, your eyes will fill with water. And if you get hit in the face during a fight that you've already got an adrenal response, and you get hit in the face, you don't, because you have that dry mouth effect. And yeah, it's interesting. Now the shakes, you always want the people to shake, that actually is when you come off the adrenal response. This is also really good too when you're done with the action scene. If you want to drive home that effect, it's a Casey's a pilot, she knows. Yeah, and so it's afterwards you get that shake. So those are all different things. So look up the effects of the adrenal response on the internet. The what? Time dilation. People very, like when they're recalling the events afterwards, time either seems to slow down or lose track of it. That's another common one. And also, this is all going to depend on once again, the point of view protagonist character, because nobody's fully inured to this stuff, but the more they've done this stuff, the less that shakes them. So once again, if I'm writing the guy who's beating the crap out of a dude and this is what he does for a living, he's not going to be as effective. Now, since we're talking about physiology, human beings don't have hit points, okay? We have blood pressure. So if you're writing realistic fight scenes, go look up, this is something you can research on the internet, trauma. What are the effects of trauma on the human body? And depending on what kind of injuries you want to inflict on your characters, you can get really creative. And you can also write this and make it closer and tighter and more visceral. If you really want to gross yourself out, if you're writing gun stuff like I do, look up gunshot wounds on the internet. And wound ballistics, look up wound ballistics, because it's not like the movies. So if you're writing that kind of thing, keep that in mind. I did wound ballistics class one time, and so it was 8 hours of looking at autopsy photo slides. And we did shotguns after lunch. Super educational for writing purposes, though. Now, okay, so we're moving on. I'm talking about like physiology and that kind of thing, and realism. It depends on the kind of audience that you are writing for. Now, I write. So I was the #1 best-selling author in Baghdad at one point. Okay, so it tells you about my audience, right? They expect a certain level of realism. Then they expect, so I have monsters and fantastic creatures, but if I shoot a dude with a gun, it's going to work like a real gun, like a real bullet. If I'm writing magic sparkle princess adventure in Candy Cane Land, I don't want that hardcore level of realistic violence. So, guys, if you are writing something that's for like a different kind of audience entirely, tone your action to that kind of level. You see what I'm saying? Okay, so my co-host on Writer Dojo, Steve, is writing a story that's like a Sparkle Fairy Princess Battle Planet. So he's actually doing a magical princess adventure story, but he's making it the most violent thing you've ever seen. It's goofy, it's funny. Yeah, so that's fun. Let's see. So, a quick note on that is, don't make a promise to the reader that you don't keep. And what I mean by that, if you start writing a story, and the story starts out where it's very much, it's going to be this level of violence, it's going to be this level of action scene, and then you suddenly shift gears on them, and it turns into like the most horrifying thing you've ever seen, you're going to lose readers. Or, the opposite direction, if you start out and it's like this dark, serious drama, and then it turns into a big, dumb cartoon, you risk losing readers too. So you're setting a promise, and then you can fulfill that promise. To me, the example I use is Inglourious Bastards, the Quentin Tarantino movie. The first opening 10 minutes of Inglourious Bastards, where the Nazi officers looking for the little girls underneath the sport, is some of the best drama ever made. Just watch that scene. It's a master class in creating tension. It's amazing. Then the movie turns into a Bugs Bunny cartoon. It's like, what? Yeah. So establish your levels there, guys. Now, I've been talking about like fight scenes as action, but there are other kinds of action scenes. don't be afraid to vary it up. And the example I'm going to use is like, so going back to my thriller series, I wrote this one thriller, and we went the outlining process. We're looking at it, so we started out, and the characters got into a gunfight. Then a little bit later, the characters got into a gunfight. Then they went to a different place and got into a gunfight. And at the end of the book, they had a gunfight. Which is cool, but no, that doesn't work, because what happens is it gets too repetitive. Don't be afraid to mix these up. So we changed one of the gunfights into an assassination, then turned into a failed assassination, that then turned into a car chase to escape. Okay, one of the gunfights, we moved it onto a boat, and we did a maritime takedown via helicopter. Okay, and then the last one, we actually moved into an Old West ghost town. So mix your stuff up. You got a physical confrontation, you got chases, you either being chased or you're the pursuer. You've got vehicular stuff is fantastic. You can get so many action scenes out of vehicles. Horses, just don't mess up the horses. They'll yell at you. Quick note on research and that kind of thing is do enough that you fake it till you make it. You can't know everything. I see a lot of people, especially new guys, if you're a new writer, they make this mistake where I'm going to research forever, okay, until I have a degree in horseology and gunsmithing. Okay, no, that's not necessary. If you're procrastinating the writing of the book, you've gone too long. Okay, so get back to work, get the story done. What I like to do personally is I'm writing the book and I get to a part where I don't know how something works, I don't know how a weapon works, I don't know what the effect of that injury would be, whatever it may be. I just put a little code. For me, it's XXX. That way I can do a control F, go back and find it later, and then fill that information in. That way, when I'm in the zone, you keep plowing ahead. I want you guys to find experts in whatever kind of action that you're writing and have them as their alpha readers. Especially when you're starting out and you don't know what you don't know. So one of the things when we did Writer Dojo, we actually started a Writer Dojo Facebook group specifically for people who are writers who, if you need an expert in something, ask. Because we got a really wide variety of people. And if you're like, I need someone who knows how the nuclear reactor on a submarine works. There's a dude in there. Yeah, see, there's always a dude. Or like, I need to know how the horses, it is. You throw that out there and there's going to be somebody there. So on action especially, if you were writing military, sci-fi, military thrillers, you got all that military stuff, do your homework to make sure you get that right. Because there's nothing more painful than the stuff that's like, oh, I got a bunch of vets here, they understand, where if it's painfully, awkwardly wrong, it just kicks people out of the book. And that's easy research to do, okay? If you were writing, like I was writing like all the special forces takedown thriller stuff, I did spreadsheets, okay? I was a military contractor, I did spreadsheets. I did math. Okay, I did the farthest thing away from door-kicking cool guy jumping out of helicopter stuff. I did lame, boring stuff, all right, as a civilian. So, I don't know this stuff, but I have alpha readers too. And so if I have a particular thing, I need to know what this is like, I'm going to bounce it off them. I got one of my guys is a retired lieutenant colonel from Army Special Forces, and he was the guy who gave me all this information. So I'm writing this thriller. I was like, hey, read this scene. I did my homework, and he went through and he'd give me like all this feedback. No, we wouldn't do that. We would do this. And guess what? All the stuff that he told me we would do this was better than what I wrote. And all that stuff winds up in the book, which makes the action scene feel real. Okay? So don't be afraid to do homework. Don't be afraid to ask people for help. Okay? Does that make sense to you guys? Like I said, we started that Facebook group. It's a good resource if you want to try to find experts on anything. I have been surprised by some of the experts and stuff we get there. I get a lot of good questions. That's what I do. And I'll go ahead and start taking questions. Go ahead. Oh, it's Writer Dojo. Yeah. So, no, that's what it's called. And so, we just did that to try to be a resource. And so, hopefully that helps people. But don't be afraid to do your homework. But once again, don't procrastinate the book. Okay, that's the key. I see so many people fail on that. I'm assuming most of you guys in here, if you're at this conference, you finish stuff. That's good, all right? But that's the big mistake I see people making. Okay, so I think I'm just trying to see the timer thing. They go so fast. All right, so I'm gonna start taking questions from you guys. And I think since we're recording, what I'll do is you ask a question and I'll paraphrase it. Oh, there's a microphone. Oh, even better. So go use the microphone, guys, if you have questions, because that way the recording will be able to pick it up. Okay. All right, go ahead.
Is it on?
Yes, it's on.
About a century ago, somebody wrote about the smell of cordite in battle. And so many people copied and cloned who had no clue that it wasn't used anymore.
Yeah.
What is the biggest mistake you see writers making these days along those lines?
I still see the cordite one a lot, and just for the people who don't know, lost me for a moment. Cordite was a British propellant. It was set of gunpowder, and so a lot of, I believe it was Dashiell Hammett used it to talk about the smell of cordite in the air after a shooting. And I see writers do that all the friggin' time still. I actually, a couple years ago, was a science fiction anthology. It was like space marines hundreds of years in the future, and they were on a spaceship, and somebody had the smell of cordite in the air. And I was like, holy crap. And it was obscure when Dashiell Hammett wrote it. I think it was, I want to say it was Hammett. It might have been something.
It was Hammett.
It was like using like a Webley Fosbury revolver or something where it actually would have made sense. Because it was very good. So be careful, guys. If you hear like a turn of phrase for something action related that you don't necessarily know what it is, do some homework on that first. Make sure you don't. And that's one of the weird things. It's entered the common lexicon, so people think it's a synonym for gunpowder. It's really not. But so just don't. So everyone in here, you probably all heard that phrase. Don't do that. Unless you're writing Zulu, okay? If you're writing Zulu, put that in. It's perfect. Okay. If they're shooting Martini Henrys, that's awesome.
Hi. You mentioned that Facebook page where you have all kinds of people on there. That,
yeah, Writer Dojo.
Oh, that is that
yeah.
one? Okay.
That's right. We do a podcast, and then we have a Facebook page for people to ask questions and stuff.
Okay, thank you. That's all that was.
Yeah, I hope it helps.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, it's a bunch of smart people, and also, just so you know, go ahead and fight. Like, it's not the rest of the internet. Like, people I had people get butthurt in there. If this other writer disagreed with me, moderator, step in and like, I don't care. You get some nice fights. Yeah.
Hi, I appreciate all the information. Just as a personal note, I took 12 years of martial arts and never got punched in the face. Still don't want to. Don't recommend it actually. Any martial arts studio is good. But no, yeah, no fight experience personally, and which is okay with me. I'm asking now about scenes that don't involve guns. Say it's a lot of knife play.
Sure. Sure.
Say it's a lot of chasing. Any recommendations there?
Okay, so I go back to the same thing where, okay, so I want you guys to think about your book like this. When you are writing any sort of adventure, and this is for the book as a whole, I don't want you to think of your book as like on one level where your tone is always the same, your pacing, your intensity is all the same. That gets boring. Have you guys ever watched like a Michael Bay movie where it's just explosions, and you get bored of explosions? Because it's been 15 minutes of explosions and now you're bored. What happens is take the intensity up here. If you keep the intensity here the whole time, then that intensity now has become normal, right? And so what happens is that now feels like the norm. So you need to take it up and take it down, take it up and take it down. So any type of action scenes, so your chases, your knife fights, whatever they may be, get away from like the mechanics of the actual thing. So you got like regular story, events are happening, they go up, they'll go down, there's emotional things, there's reveals. Then all of a sudden, now we're in the action scene, life or death. You've taken up that intensity. It's the chase. They're running through the alley. Remember get Point Break, where Keanu Reeves is chasing the guy through the alley, and at one point the dude picks up a dog and throws a dog. Remember that? Great movie, right? Great movie. That's a perfect example of an action scene. It's like an unexpected action. This is a foot chase through a suburban neighborhood, right? Beautiful, beautiful action sequence. And what it is it went from one type of action sequence to shift gears and then change. Because the most important thing is it could be anything your imagination allows for that intensity, as long as you can take it up and take it down. So knife fights are fantastic. Do your homework on that though, because there's a lot of misinformation about knives. Swords, oh my gosh, sword people. Dude, I'm not a sword guy. I write another fantasy series, but I'm not a sword guy. So I have a sword guy. right? And he reads all the stuff. I do my research, I kick it over to him, he goes through and he says, no, don't do that. My last book, he came back, he's like, yeah, that all works. And I was like, okay, good, I did my homework. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Go ahead.
Thank you. How do you describe the cocking of a pistol, rifle, shotgun? Is it clack, crack, crack, clack,
Okay,
crack?
so onomatopoeia. Okay, so using like sounds, like putting the sound. I love that, especially like I'm doing a thing tomorrow. I'm doing a class on writing for Audible, for writing for audiobooks, and actually we'll talk about that in there. I love putting sounds. Boom. Okay. I don't know how many times my narrators of like 25 novels now, how many times my narrators had to actually read the word boom. That stuff actually works great, and you can describe it as however it actually sounds. You just don't get too silly and go full comic book, whoosh poo, or whatever. So just think about it like something that is going to convey that sound, especially if it's going to come to the point of your character's perception. So there's nothing wrong with clack. I heard metallic clack. And on the cocking of the gun, it's going to depend on what the weapon is. In movies, there's always the constant dramatic cocking of the gun. We don't really do that in real life. That's not a thing. You don't cock the hammer to accentuate your point. I love in movies the dramatic shotgun pump.
Yeah.
It's like, it's time for action. And you know what happens in real life? You just ejected a shell. And I can't remember, there's like one cop movie I watched, I swear that the main character had like 3 dramatic shotgun pumps before the last scene. And it's like, it's time to go. And he kept doing that. I was like, dude, you're going to be empty by the time. I hope the rest of this is off camera, is him shoving shells in. Trying to make it. Whatever noise, however it sounds to you, this is one reason, guys, go actually shoot. Go to the range and shoot. Get your gun nut buddies, and you all have a gun nut buddy who will take you. Unless you live in like New York or LA, and then they got to keep it on the down low. But we have a secret handshake for that. So go and actually go to the range and feel it. Feel the recoil. Listen to wear your hearing protection. But you get a chance. The noise, the feel, the vibe, the smell. There's all this there, and this is all stuff that can go into writing.
You don't forget to take the safety off the block.
So, that's another thing, guys. Glocks don't have safety. Okay, but writers, they always say Glock. Because when you write Glock in a book, you think it's like, ooh, cool, I know a gun term. That's like writing Honda. It doesn't actually sound badass, it's Toyota. It's just a thing, right? And it's the equivalent to a Toyota. It's not that exciting, guys. But no, don't do anything where it's like dramatic cocking or taking safeties off guns that don't have it. And you can discover this on 3 minutes of Wikipedia, okay? Funny YouTube, there's a lot of bad writing materials out there of technical stuff. Go ahead.
On that note, I wrote a click versus bang on a misfire on my nonfiction book.
Oh, you can totally do that. I've done that, where you get the unexpected click when you're hoping for a bang.
Yeah. And that happens in real life.
Yeah, that does happen in real life, usually because something has gone horribly wrong.
Also, getting punched in the face isn't a big deal. You go numb.
I'm looking at a guy, I don't want to call him, but a guy who I was taking pistol training classes with who had a click instead of a bang during a timed event that we were doing. That was sad. That was tragic.
So my question is just, could you comment on a little bit on...
Remember I was talking about taking that wave up, taking that wave down, the intensity? Dialogue during action scenes is fantastic. Actually, you think of some of the most memorable movie scenes you've ever seen, there's usually like a cool one-liner. Okay, because people love that stuff. Also, think about it, in real life, the more dangerous and sucky your job is, the more likely you are to have a highly developed sense of humor, especially a dark one. And so people who have really super dangerous jobs are usually funny as hell. They're either funny as hell or they're the darkest people you've ever seen, but they're usually funny as hell. So depending on the kind of, I throw a lot of comedy into my action scenes where not comedy, it's not like slapstick, but people say funny stuff. I had a couple buddies and they were in a real life gunfight, and this was in Iraq, and they started doing bad Italian accents to each other. It was Josh Hill. And they started doing bad Italian, like Super Mario Brothers level accents in a gunfight. Why? Because they thought it was funny. People think, oh, stupid, that's unrealistic, but people do that kind of stuff in life. So if you have an opportunity to mix it up and get some humor in there, get some, also think of it this way. Action scenes are a great time to do your plot reveals. I'm your father, Luke. They interrupt in a sword fight to say, I'm your father. It's a big reveal, right? So you can have plot furtherance and character furtherance in those action scenes, like I was talking about at the very beginning. So stopping to have dialogue is great. Also, be careful with that though, because it depends on the type of characters you're writing. Most people aren't really that witty in a fight. Like if it's a real fight where you're trying to murder the other guy, usually it's a lot of panting. Okay? It's not a lot of ha-ha, I'm really left-handed. Fantastic line, right? You guys all laugh because you know it's going to be a movie. That's great. So if it's the kind of story you're telling and it works, by all means, yeah, stick that dialogue. Oh, she good.
Hi there. So, as a gun nut, how do you balance your passion with making allowances for people who don't have that level of expertise?
Good point. Okay, so this is one that actually, my first book, I went the wrong direction because I self-published my first novel and I sold it primarily on internet gun forums. Okay, for us old guys, when we got started self-publishing way back then, we didn't have Amazon and Kindle, okay? We had $25 print-on-demand paperbacks. I'm that old. So, but don't, because I was selling it to internet gun forum nuts, I actually gun nutted it up and I put way too much exposition about the equipment because that was my target audience. And in fact, over the later years, I didn't do it nearly as much. So you want to give just enough information that it's cool. And it's kind of, if you're reading Tom Clancy, some people are really super into the depth, the explanation of all the techno stuff. They're super into it. Other people start to skim those scenes. So it depends on the kind of audience you're writing for. So now I would go gun nutty, but I wouldn't give you an entire equipment list of the whole thing. Though I did have a couple books ago, somebody had complained about that. I was working on another book, so I did a 2-paragraph info dump on one particular gun, just out of spite. And it was basically a commercial. I put in the middle of the book, I stopped for the JP Enterprises, I stopped in and put a commercial for a gun. Out of spite. So basically, you want to give enough information that you're making people happy, but not so much that you're bogging the story down. It's just like any other type of info dumping. It's just like your world building, you don't want to give too much of an info dump at one time. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So, go ahead. Casey?
Hi Larry, my name's Casey.
Yeah. She edited a series of anthologies with me, so.
During that process, you edited a story of mine. You gave me some really good advice, and I was wondering if I could recall your attention to that because I think it might be useful for the room. Could you speak a little bit more to the specific techniques of pacing that you use to make an action sequence seem fast and chaotic? Specifically, you talked about the short sentences and the sentence fragments.
Yeah. Okay. So this is one we did talk about. So this is nuts about. This is why I wish we had multiple hours, guys. But I could literally, like I said, I did 3-hour-long episodes about this, and still didn't get the stuff. One of the things I gave Casey advice on is in your action sequences, think about it that the way you're portraying the information to the reader. If you want the reader to feel like they're getting sucked along rapidly, they're getting pulled along through this fast-paced thing, make your writing faster paced. How do you make your writing faster? Shorter sentences, choppy, have your point of view character rather than getting a big descriptive thing. It's a short, pithy, boom, boom, this happened, right? It's you want to grab that reader by the throat and just drag them through the next page of action. You want them to read that scene without pause. You want them to get done with that scene and go, okay? Because that's what you're going for, guys. I use the word visceral a lot. I use synonyms here. This is why I use word processing programs. I can look up synonyms and they go. But you want to grab them, you want to hook them, you want to pull them. So short, choppy sentences. Don't over-describe. Don't get into the trap too. If you're fighting multiple sentences, I think we had this too with yours because you had multiple bad guys in the scene. Or they didn't know their names. When you have assailants you don't know their names, don't be afraid to assign a name to them, even if it's big guy, little guy, lefty, righty, nose, ugly, butt face. face, whatever.
Bad breath, big nose.
Bad breath, big nose, fugly, whatever. Give those guys some descriptor. Okay, cool. Give those guys some sort of descriptor. That way you're not slowing the story down to make it clear who did what. Okay? So I'm a big fan of that, especially like when I'm doing detective fiction. If I'm doing hard-boiled kind of detective, then the names are fun and stuff. Okay? A lot of times with the action thing, it's just, terrorist number 1, terrorist number 2, whatever. But just make sure you give some sort of thing that you can just get in there, boom, boom. And all the info dump I got telling you about weapons and stuff, and setup, and the scene where Rambo is kitting up, buckling and strapping, and that's cool. But you do that before. You do that in the build-up scenes. When you're taking up that tension, that's when you do that. Dean Koontz is actually a master of this. Read some Dean Koontz novels. He did one where a guy was going in an action sequence, and he got into an elevator, so the fight was up at the top of the building, and so as he went up the elevator floors, he kept getting ready for the fight. Master class in ramping up tension. Okay? A lot of different ways you can do that. But then when you get to the actual explosive part, boom, 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 boom. You go quick. So if you're doing something fantasy where you got magical powers that are complicated, try to establish the rules of those magical powers before you get to the action scene. Because the last thing you want to do is you want to have an action scene where stuff is happening fast and stuff's flying, and then you stop to explain something. Or sci-fi. If you have a sci-fi some sort of sci-fi system that comes into play, establish the rules of that before. So don't be like, oh man, super awesome, badass. Oh wait, now let's stop and explain how the turbo drive works on the starship for a page. Okay, action. You don't do that. Okay, so once again, so think about my things. Don't do a sudden boring, then go again. Don't do that. So establish that stuff before. Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Hey, there's a lot of bad writing advice out there that people tend to propagate. Do you think you can think of one that is what people give out a lot that's really bad, and could you say it in your bad writing advice voice?
For those of you that will listen to the show, the bad writing advice voice is
hilarious.
Try to think of something. You need to let us know all the characters' emotions during the scene. Anytime I read bad writing advice off Twitter, that's the voice I use. It's like the super annoying Muppet voice. Okay, so I got rejected. So Monster Hunter got rejected. So Monster Hunter, just so you guys know, I've sold like 10 million copies of Monster Hunter now. Okay. It's done really well in multiple languages around the world for 12 years now. It's doing great. It got rejected. So when I was out there submitting, I got rejected pretty hardcore. And this one agent rejected and said, well, in this opening fight scene where this guy's boss turns into a werewolf and is trying to eat him, and it's this brutal fight to the death, one dude versus a werewolf. That's a great opening sequence, right? And I had this one agent go, but how does he feel? I was like, but was that the character feel? I was like, well, I said it hurts. Blood is squirting out of him. He's worried about that. There's the part where he got thrown through the ceiling. That part sucked. What's his emotions right there?
He's living in the street.
It was such a dumb. To me, even then as a newbie writer, as a complete new baby writer, it was such a dumb piece of advice. The agent was very much, well, I need to know what this character's emotions are. Here's the thing, guys, and when you're in an action scene, if you're slowing down to get too much into the character's emotions, you remember that I talked about this? You just went, okay? So the emotions that you get in an intense fight scene are going to usually be fear or anger. And a lot of times, depending on the capability of the person involved, once we go back to point of view character, they're setting that aside. It's like, yeah, I got some emotions going on, but I'm going to deal with this dude over here first who's trying to murder me. Then I will think through that stuff. And that's when you write in the shakes. Okay? Does that make sense? So yes, that's my bad writing. Oh, we're almost out of time, guys. So you got 30 seconds. Go, fast.
One quick comment on the experts things, on medical stuff, get a doctor.
Oh yeah, doctors are fantastic.
If you have a fight scene and you tear off a limb or you rip it,
especially
break a bone and then dislocate a shoulder, that's not going to happen.
Especially emergency room doctors. they see a lot of cool stuff. Okay, guys, so I'm almost out of time. Thank you very much for coming. Woo!